Well, Dr. Tim Driscoll grew up on a cattle station in Western Australia, but it was on a trip to Ireland, aged 19, that he fell into the mental health space as a psychiatric nurse, where he also fell in love with the sector. He joins us live. Tim, thanks for being here. It's an unlikely start.
Yeah, it is quite an unlikely start, absolutely. I mean, going from cattle to a psychiatric hospital was an interesting move. There was two people going for that job. One of them was a butcher and one of them was someone who chased cows, so they went for me. So that's how that worked
Bit closer.
Well, I guess so. Yeah, that's how it worked, yeah.
What was it about it that you liked about it?
I think initially I didn't really know much about mental health, and then working in the psych hospital in Dublin, I certainly learnt a lot more about it. And then when I came back, I actually studied in Australia when I came back from there, so I was there for just over a year. And I guess the other thing that really interested me was that I guess really access to mental health services in rural and remote Australia. That was kind of a passion when I came back, and I've been doing that with RFDS for about 6 years now. But certainly, I mean, it was very different to what I'd grown up with. It wasn't something I'd sort of seen growing up. It wasn't a common thing that was available, but certainly there was a lot of mental health impacts. I mean, suicide rates in the bush have always been high, and that was like that even when I was a kid. So certainly a need that needed to be filled, and I guess that was the thing that sort of interested me in the area.
Were you a fish out of water?
Not really. No. I tend to be able to swim in most waters, so I'm okay. Yeah, don't do it well. I'm more of a duck. I can do sort of most things sort of reasonably well.
So tell me, you came back, you studied, you then got into that space here. What is about, I guess, unique to rural areas when it comes to mental health?
I think what's unique, I mean, the mental health rates are the same. I think people wait a lot longer to get help, and that's been a challenge. I think access is a big part of that, but also, people do just wait longer. I mean, they do that for going to the doctor too, and that's a challenge. I mean, people get deeper into the hole before they get help, so it's harder to get them out. I mean, it's possible to get them out, it just takes longer. But I think that's one of the things that's somewhat frustrating, I guess, is that people wait a long time to get help in rural areas with mental health. So, but
how do you address that?
Well, you basically, I think the community is sort of addressing that for us in a way. I mean, I think conversations are happening more around mental health. I've seen that particularly in men in the last sort of 5 years. That's really improved. So conversations are starting. They're realising that it's 1 in 5 people every year are impacted. So I think that helps. But I think it's also having services that are easily accessible, and that's the other thing. And also having people within rural communities where people can sort of check people out and then decide whether they want to talk to them. That's helpful as well. So I think those things are key. And I guess it's really just about making it normal, making sure it's a quality service that people get. Often it's their first interaction with any sort of a mental health service. And then obviously making sure that we're keeping that conversation going within communities. So that's kind of the aim.
How do you equip your staff to deal with these circumstances?
Well, what we do in terms of supporting one another, I guess we do get together in terms of supporting each other. We have supervision that we do regularly to talk with another clinician. That's one of the key things. And it is challenging for people often, coming from an urban setting to a rural setting.
Particularly when you've got droughts and floods and things they may not have come across personally, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think one of the big challenges, and that is a big challenge, I mean, obviously rural areas are impacted by, flood and fire and many other catastrophes, unfortunately. But I think one of the biggest differences is that being part of a community and also serving that community, so seeing people that you're working with everywhere. And that's a new thing for people from an urban area. So usually they'd sort of see people and they wouldn't see them in the community, but often there'd be sort of dual roles that they'll be navigating. So that's a big thing for them. But it's also very, very rewarding for them, and many people actually really do get hooked into that, so it's fantastic.
How has your rural upbringing helped shape the way you work in this space?
I guess, well, I suppose just knowing about the industry helps. I mean, certainly knowing what people are talking about, what they're concerned about, knowing some of the right words helps. But also just understanding what people are talking about. That's really helpful, and also kind of understand the hesitation to access mental health services, because I would have felt the same way. So I certainly understand where that comes from, and I think that's quite useful. Just sort of understanding that it can be challenging for people to come and access service, and also making it as easy and accessible, despite those challenges for people to access. So I think that's been useful.
Just quickly before we go, if people do need help and are watching this, where can they go?
I'd just go to the RFDS website for our services, but right throughout Australia, I always recommend Lifeline because obviously we've got a national audience here, and obviously we're not everywhere. We're not even in all parts of Queensland, but obviously 13 11 14 for Lifeline. I always recommend people call that. It works Australia-wide, and they can also locate services in your local area. So always can't recommend them enough. So,
Dr. Tim Driscoll, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much.
Well, still to come, we meet the mum on a mission to teach kids about where their food comes from and the new app to help farmers find love.